Hello and welcome to LM Teachers English. In this video we're going to look at the play version of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime from the AQA English Literature Paper 2 and from the modern play section. So the first thing to note is that this is the play version. It's very important that you are not looking at the novel version. As you can see here, it says Simon Stevens, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, adapted from the novel by Mark Haddon. So this play has been adapted from the novel that already existed. We are then going to turn the page and have a look here. We've got a list of all the characters in the play. I won't read through all of those, but if you've got your own copy, it's interesting to refer back to if you need it, although not essential. One of the important things on this page here is, and sometimes people skip over it, but actually it's useful information. All actors remain on the stage unless prescribed otherwise. There is also a dead dog with a fork sticking out of it. Scenes run into one another without interruption, regardless of alterations in space or time or chronology. So we'll just unpick that quickly first before we go into looking at the actual the dialogue in the play, the speech. So all actors are on the stage unless prescribed otherwise. So in a way, it's not your typical play where you're aware, the audience is aware as they're watching this play that it is a play. You're never taken, that seems obvious, I know, but you're never taken completely out of the action. You're always aware that it's a play you're watching. In other words, in dramatic terms, the actors are breaking the fourth wall, and all that means is there is no kind of barrier between the audience and the actors. The actors are aware that they're acting and we're aware that they're aware. It gets confusing, but you will see what I mean by that as we go through the play as well over these next few series of videos. Okay, so all the actors are on the stage sitting at the sidelines, and when it's their turn to speak they get up and they say their lines and do their bit, and then they go back and sit on the side again. There is also a dead dog with a fork sticking out of it. So when the play begins, there's a fake dead dog lying in the middle of the stage with a garden fork sticking out of it. So straight away, it's kind of funny. It's darkly funny. Obviously, a dog dying is not funny, but it's funny because it's so unusual and it's not something you often see. So in that respect, it kind of makes you laugh. It's dark humour, that's what it's called. Then we have another very interesting point here. Scenes run into one another without interruption, regardless of alterations in space or time or chronology. So all that means is the scenes that are happening on the stage are not in any particular order. It's not clear if it's the next day. You might have had a conversation between two characters, and then suddenly that one of them leaves and another one joins in, and you don't know whether it's 2 days later, 3 days later, 4 days later, or an hour later. So we would consider, as we're reading it, why Stevens has done that. The guy who adapted this play from a novel, Simon Stevens, I'll refer to him as Stevens from now on. Why did he do that? What was the purpose? So if you know nothing about the novel, that's perfectly fine, and if you know something about the novel, then you've probably started to come up with ideas already as to why the director might have done that. But if you haven't, let's just go with it and see why you think that might be. What we'll do is we're going to read, I'm going to read a little bit to you today. You can see it's a play, so it's a bit awkward for one person to do it, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a sample, and then I will give you something to consider, an activity to do, and perhaps even an essay question, depending on what level you're on, will depend on which task you choose. So what level you're at, sorry. So if you've read this before and this is just revision for you, you may well want to do the essay question that I offer you. But if this is the first time you're looking at this, then you probably want to do the activity to get used to finding quotes and getting used to characters and the events, the plot of the play. Just another important note before I begin, this question is on Literature Paper 2 and you are not, I'm recording this in April 2020. At this point you do not get a copy of the text in the exam with you. So it's very important that you learn quotes off by heart. Simple quotes, so it's nothing to get worried about, but that might be another activity that you could do alongside this, is jot down any quotes that you think are important and try and learn them, put them on flashcards or something. Okay, let's begin. I should just say there's some swearing as well, so brace yourselves. Okay, part 1. A dead dog lies in the middle of the stage. A large garden fork is sticking out of its side. Christopher Boone, 15 years old, stands on one side of it. His 42-year-old neighbour, Mrs. Shears, stands on the other. They stand for a while without saying anything. The rest of the company, which just means the actors, watch, waiting to see who is going to dare to speak first. What in fuck's name have you done to my dog? Christopher is frozen to the spot. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh my fucking Christ! Christopher's teacher, 27-year-old Siobhan, opens Christopher's book. She reads from it. It was 7 minutes after midnight. The dog was lying on the grass in the middle of the lawn of Mrs. Shears' house. Get away from my dog! Its eyes were closed. It looked as if it was running on its side, the way dogs run when they think they are chasing a cat in a dream. But the dog was not running or asleep. The dog was dead. Get away from my dog! There was a garden fork sticking out of the dog. The dog was called Wellington. It belonged to Mrs. Shears, who was our friend. She lived on the opposite side of the road, 2 houses to the left. Get away from my dog! Christopher takes 2 steps away from the dog. My name is Christopher John Francis Boone. I know all the countries of the world and the capital cities and every prime number up to 7,507. Get away from my dog, for Christ's sake! Christopher puts his hands over his ears. He closes his eyes. He rolls forward. He presses his forehead into the grass. He starts groaning. After 12.5 minutes, a policeman arrived. He had a big orange leaf stuck to the bottom of his shoe, which was poking out from one side. This is good, Christopher. It's quite exciting. I like the details. They make it more realistic. Policeman 1 enters. He has a big orange leaf stuck to the bottom of his shoe, which is poking out from one side. He squats next to Christopher. He squatted down next to me. He said to me, Christopher stops groaning. Would you like to tell me what's going on here, young man? Christopher lifts his head from the ground. There is some time. Christopher looks at the policeman. There is some time. I do not tell lies. Mother used to say that this was because I was a good person, but it's not because I'm a good person, it's because I can't tell lies. The dog is dead. I'd got that far. I think someone killed the dog. How old are you? I'm 15 years and 3 months and 2 days. And what precisely are you doing in the garden? I'm talking to you. Okay, what were you doing in the garden in the first place? I was holding the dog. Why were you holding the dog? Why were you holding the dog? I like dogs. Did you kill the dog? I did not kill the dog. Is this your fork? No. You seem very upset about this. I'm going to ask you once again. Christopher starts groaning. Terrific. Christopher carries on groaning. Young man, I'm going to ask you to stop making that noise and to stand up, please, calmly and quietly. Christopher carries on groaning. Marvellous. Great. Just flipping. Policeman 1 tries to lift him up by his arm. Christopher screams. He hits Policeman 1, who stares at Christopher. For a while, the two look at one another, neither entirely sure what to say or quite believing what has happened. I'm arresting you for assaulting a police officer. I strongly advise you to get in the back of the police car because if you try any of that monkey business again, you little shit, I'm going to seriously lose my rag. Is that understood? Alright, so that's up to page 6, so we'll leave it there. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to talk about what on earth is going on. And we're going to talk about the characters we've been introduced to, and then I will set you up with with an activity or two. So we're going to do all of that in the next 5 minutes, so let's crack on. Alright, so you'll notice that the stage directions that we get given are very useful for giving us a bit of background information, but at points the character Siobhan repeats what is said in the stage directions. Now that is because Siobhan is reading from Christopher's book. So we've got it here. She says, Christopher's teacher, 27-year-old Siobhan, opens Christopher's book. She reads from it. So we now know that what we are hearing from Siobhan is from Christopher's book, is from a play that Christopher wrote. Okay? So therefore, we are reading a play that is about a play that was written about something that happened to this boy Christopher. That sounds confusing. Don't worry if it's confused you. We'll keep talking about it as these videos go on. So for now, all you need to understand is that we are reading, what we have here is a play that the character Christopher wrote within the play. Obviously, in real life, Simon Stevens wrote the play. You might have also noticed in that first reading that there is something maybe unusual about the character of Christopher. He doesn't behave as we might expect somebody to behave when they find a dead dog. So we'll talk about that as well. And the other thing, of course, is we have this character, Mrs. Shears, who swears a lot and she's very angry. And then, of course, the event that happens is Christopher assaults a police officer. Just notice that what it is that makes Christopher hit the policeman is the fact that the policeman tried to lift Christopher by his arm. So Christopher screams and hits the policeman. So Christopher, we can tell already, does not like to be touched or handled at all, and for that reason he lashed out. Maybe he didn't realise that you know, it was wrong to hit a policeman, as most people would know. And then Christopher's arrested finally. We also know that Christopher's only 15, so being arrested would, for this, he's unlikely to go to jail, for example, or to prison. He'll have a parent who will look after him. Okay, so a few things I want to draw your attention to then, or kind of ask you questions about that you can then go on to answer. How is the way that Christopher is behaving unusual? And then compare that with the way that he is behaving that actually might be considered typical for a teenager. So what you could do on a piece of paper in your exercise book is you could split it in half, and on the one side you have unusual behaviours, and then on the other side of your page you could have typical teenage behaviours. And I'm aware that obviously most of you watching this are teenagers, so you should know better than anyone what are typical teenage behaviours. So maybe have a think about that before you start. Sort of stereotypical, you know, not every single teenager has to act this way, but stereotypical kind of rebellious, maybe stroppy, doesn't like being told what to do, that kind of thing. So you could do that as one of your activities. So for example, we have things in here that are typical in that he doesn't like the policeman trying to grab him, so that could be considered typical teenage behaviour. And then things that are not very typical, perhaps this groaning that he's doing. He rolls forward, he starts groaning. That is quite unusual behaviour. We would expect somebody to use their vocabulary. Perhaps Christopher is struggling to express himself and to say that he's upset. Clearly he has an attachment to the dog that has died, but he's struggling to express that verbally. So that is the activity that I want you to do. So to compare Christopher's behaviours, typical teenager, and compare that to how actually this is quite unusual, atypical. We also have something, Siobhan, the character of Siobhan, and this section here is the perfect way to illustrate the character that she's playing, because she's actually has two roles in the play. Her first role is to read out from Christopher's book, so she's the narrator, and then her second role is actually the fact that she's Christopher's teacher, as it says here. Christopher's teacher, 27-year-old Siobhan. But as she says here, she's reading out this nice description of the policeman with the leaf, and then she says, "This is good, Christopher, it's quite exciting. I like the details, they make it more realistic." So she's not reading that from the book, that's herself. Those are the things she's saying on top of the play, on top of the description in the play. Okay, so if you're going to write an essay question based on this section, you might want to think about how Christopher is presented as being, well actually I'm going to leave it there, how is Christopher presented in this section? And you would use a range of quotes, perhaps things that people say to him, perhaps his reactions. He doesn't say an awful lot in this section. It's communicated through Siobhan and other people's reactions to him, so have a look at that. All right, I'm going to leave it there, and we are going to be back soon for another video on the next section of this play. Thanks, bye!